Welcome to the podcast where we celebrate innovation for a happy planet. I am your host, Abigail Carroll. After the oyster boom came the seaweed boom. While 98% of total farmed seaweed in the world comes from Asia, over the past decade, entrepreneurs in the U.S., Europe, and Africa have been trying to change that by producing locally grown, high-quality seaweed for their domestic markets. I've met a number of these entrepreneurs, and it's not easy. Once you master aquaculture, you have to find a market, and that is proving to be a challenge. Many of these companies have gone bottom up, like Akua, whose former CEO came on the podcast in the spring to share her story of how it all fell apart. A few months ago, we thought Maine-based Atlantic Sea Farms, commonly referred to as ASF, was going to live a similar fate. Much like Akua, it seemed like nothing could hold it back. It raised millions of dollars and made an incredible splash in the national media. But they just couldn't become profitable. ASF shareholders, however, refused to shutter the company. They opted to restructure and brought in turnaround specialist Barrett Wood. Barrett joins us today to tell us how he is breathing new life into the company and paving a way to profitability. There's nothing we like more than a comeback kid. Welcome to the podcast, Barrett.
Thank you, Abigail. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, you've come all the way from Texas. You're here in Maine for a special opportunity to turn around Atlantic Sea Farms. Tell me a little bit about what that means to be a turnaround specialist.
Yeah, so I started out as an attorney out in West Texas, and I no longer practice, but still carry some of those skills. But one of the things I always enjoyed when I was practicing was the restructuring space. And so now as I move more to the investment and advisory side, I tend to lean more towards those projects. A turnaround, a turnaround always starts with a company that's in trouble. But what happens next really varies case by case. And it can go anywhere from a quick sale to, a company that has a full-on comeback and experiences major growth after. So how did I get from Texas all the way up to Maine? Well, this company, Atlantic Sea Farms, drew a lot of attention all over the country. And one of the main investors was a fund here, True Wealth Ventures in Austin, that I've known the principals of for a very long time. And they knew that I did this type of work, and they saw an overlap in the situation that Atlantic Sea Farms was in earlier this year and the stuff that I tend to work on. So that's how I got there in May, and we've been working hard on it ever since.
So this sector of these seaweed farms, we saw a big, huge surge of seaweed farms. In fact, we had Akua on our podcast not too long ago for a situation that seemed like it could have actually been the fate of Atlantic Sea Farms. They blew up earlier in the year, and she's now in Africa helping elephants, which sounds like another exciting opportunity. But what's going on here? What happened to Atlantic Sea Farms, and why do you think they're here in this situation, and what do you think can be done? Because obviously you think something could be done. You wouldn't be here.
For sure. So, we'll take a step back and talk about kind of the history. Atlantic Sea Farms was founded in 2018. Bree Warner did a spectacular job in drawing awareness and raising capital for this company. I think certainly not in North America. And so, and the vertically integrated was another challenge that she took on. And so how did we get here? It's not unusual for a company that grows very quickly to sort of lose sight of the economics. It happens frequently. When you're growing fast, you're spinning a lot of plates at once. And so what Atlantic Sea Farms was, I think the jam that they got in, frankly, was they were trying to do too many things at once. And that included, they had 35 products that they were putting into retail stores. And, with 35 SKUs, at some point you're putting them in the market and you're just kind of crossing your fingers. And retail's tough. It's really tough to beat your margins. It's really tough to have a consistent demand there if you're just not confident in that already. So despite an extraordinary effort, again, they were losing money. And kind of finally, the music ran out in terms of the ability to raise enough capital to match that. So in May, the board made the difficult decision to discontinue that model, and didn't know exactly what was next, but just had to turn off that faucet. Had to
Yeah.
stop the retail, you know, hemorrhaging, to be completely honest. So we took a good look at it. And if there's anything that my professional career has trained me to do, is to kind of take a quick assessment. And I assessed and said, okay, let's go back to a simple and as basic a process as we can, and let's just nail that. My first thing when I enter into a new situation, I like to ask every single person, customers, stakeholders, lenders, everybody, what's the best thing this company does better than anybody else? And here, clearly, because they've made the industry, but also just because of the talent involved, that thing was cultivating kelp. They're fantastic at cultivating and harvesting kelp. And why was that kelp superior? Because it's traceable. If you compare it to raw seaweed, what they call rockweed, you don't know where it's coming from, and you don't know the water that it's been in, and it's unreliable in terms of the ultimate customer that needs it. So we took a good look and we said, they're definitely good at this, but we've got to get back to margins. And so we did. We got back and we figured out what the products we had already going out the door that were selling well, and who were they going to. And it turns out that was more on a B2B basis than the retail. And so we quickly pivoted to selling by the bag, as we say, and not by the box, and by the retail box.
So who are these wholesale buyers? Who are these businesses that you're selling to?
Oh, for sure. We're going to wholesalers. We're going to distributors. We're going to restaurants. We're having a very good early discussions with Legal Seafoods. The executive chef said, let's do it. Loved it. We're going to be in cafeterias, either K through 12 or all the way up to higher ed. We've had great conversations with the University of Maine and UMass already. We just turned this new model on, and where we've gotten, the progress in the last 40 days has been unbelievable. And I think that's a testament to, one, the foundation that this company already had, the goodwill and the support that it had in the community and in the business world, but also we put together a group of external advisors, Andrew Wilkinson and Andy Reitgut. Andrew Wilkinson's at North Coast, and Andy Reitgut's he's the CEO of Dr. Prager's. And Zoe Croft, who was with Atlantic Sea Farms within the last year and knew the place backwards and forwards. And they've made introductions on this B2B level that might have taken weeks or months, and are getting us right there to the decision makers, so to speak, right away. So yeah, stay tuned. We're gonna be in your nearest cafeterias and restaurants here very, very quickly.
Well, it's interesting because what Brianna did was create a ton of brand equity. So you're stepping into sort of a startup, but you already have a lot of goodwill in the community. And I think that's to her credit. And I think that makes it an interesting challenge.
No question. I've done several of these, and what was unique about this situation was the amount of building blocks I was able to start with. We had as I mentioned, a first-class team. These are the experts in their space. And they're resilient. They're also versatile. We've had to wear a lot of extra hats, as you might imagine, in the last 120 days or so. And they've done it with grace, and they've done it with with excellence. And we have a board that like I said, made tough decisions, but also stuck around. I've been in situations where you can't get the board on the phone when the company goes in the wrong direction. And so we had an incredible investor base. This investor base is unique in that they are equally, if not more, in tune with the impact than frankly the bottom line most of the time on the conversations that we're having. So our bank has been amazing. Anytime I enter into a new situation, the first question I ask is, how angry is our lender at us? And that usually dictates. Sometimes it's, I'll enter into a company that has software that just didn't work, or it's behind the market, so to speak. And so you've got to face that reality. But people are buying kelp, and we just need to find the best channels to put that into. So, and as you mentioned, we're not a startup. Startup doesn't begin with 204 customers that had already bought the product from you. We just needed to go back and knock again if they wanted to buy from us again.
Right. So you've got, tell me about the farmers on this journey, because you've got a network of farmers. You aren't farming the seaweed yourself, if I understand correctly. You've got people in your network. So how have they, made it through this period of transition, and what are their hopes and dreams right now?
Yeah. So the first year in 2018, ASF farmed 30,000 pounds. And then fast forward to 2024, it was 1.3 million pounds.
Wow.
And that's all a testament to Bree, obviously at the top, but Liz and Aurora in our supply division are spectacular. And they stay in constant communication with that farmer network. They also provide, kind of the tools and the permitting advice to really get the farmers up to speed and ready. And they handle 99% of those discussions. It's an amazing operation, and they scaled it up to a significant size. Now, when we realized the reality that we were over harvesting, and those weren't really matching our sales forecast, we had to do something about it. So we did cut back this year on our harvest. We were trying to be as transparent with the farmer network and really as quick with information as we could, as quickly as we had it. We made sure this previous harvest in the spring of 25, right as I came on, one of the first things that we decided to do was we were going to actually pay ahead of schedule, because there was some concern. Word gets around, and we wanted to head that off. So we said you were going to be paid by, I believe it was the end of June, and we went ahead and paid them in May, just to make sure that those relations stayed intact, and also there was that transparency again.
I'm just trying to put the pieces of the first sort of iteration together. What happened to, the investors, angel investors and stuff in that first, like in a turnaround situation? Do they lose out? Do they just shrink? Like, how does that get managed?
It all depends on the situation. Yeah. But in this situation, we're raising again, and the valuation had to come down because it's a different company. And so there is a dilution factor for sure.
Yeah.
And there's, I'll use that word transparency again. We've been very clear about the new reality. Yeah. And we've invited those same investors and said, this is, you can look at this as a loss. You can look at it as a new opportunity, and ask us anything you want about where we're at. But, I would completely understand if you've had it with us, but I could also understand why you'd be excited.
Sometimes it's easier with all the information of the first round. So you've got some new opportunities too, because to date you worked with a lot with, or pretty much exclusively, I think, with kelp, and you're looking at some other seaweeds. How is that going to open up the world of opportunity for you all?
Yeah, so we're excited about dulse. And I'll be completely honest, Abigail, before May, I wouldn't have been able to tell you the difference between the lot of things.
So dulse tastes like bacon, everybody says.
Exactly.
Who doesn't like bacon?
They're raving about it. So I'm grateful throughout to be able to call Sue and Kara in our innovation department, because they're not just ASF experts. They're international experts on these things. But dulse, I'll tell you, when I first got into ASF, the early conversations, if we were talking about the day to day, and then all of a sudden somebody said the word dulse, people would sit up, and their posture would change, and there would be just a little bit more energy and excitement, and I picked up on that, and so I said, this is what we need to do, and dulse demonstrates kind of where we're taking this new model. We're not going to try 35 things at once. We're going to nail this. We're going to nail what we're doing, one at a time, so to speak. So we have these 3 SKUs that we're doing at the moment, and then we're going to do a very deliberate and, you know, objective launch of dulse. We're doing a beta this harvest. We're going to do 10,000 pounds. We're going to make sure we get it right. And then in the next harvest, we're going to try for 100,000 pounds. We already know just from, kind of a study of our peers in our market that frankly, people just asking us that we've got 80,000 pounds of demand. So we're matching those concepts. We're being very careful, but also, ultimately we're going to be more ambitious with that product.
You said something that took me right back to grad school. I went to grad school in New York City, and I sat in on a class about turnaround management, and the teacher there started the first class by telling this story about how they went into the first thing they did in any turnaround project was go in and clean the bathrooms themselves to show that management cares about employees. And so you mentioned that the posture correcting when you started talking about dulse with people in your environment, and it made me think that as a turnaround guy, you are, I think, acutely attuned to people, and you have to have a really good read on your environment so you can just plunge in out of nowhere and get people to work with you. Can you just speak to that a little bit?
For sure. And there's a couple different ways that, CROs or restructuring advisors work. I mean, and a lot of times may have to do with basically the size of the project. But the way that I have always approached it is I want to be there face to face as quickly as possible. And not just with the team itself, but with all of the stakeholders. So as quickly as I could, I went to Maine and I sat in the conference room at Atlantic Sea Farms, and I went and sat in the conference room with our first lien holder, and we had a face-to-face discussion. I think that there's just so much more value in that. I've had some mentors that have had a strong influence on me, and that's always been important. So whenever I can, I'm going to be in the conference room. Some advisors, I'm not to denigrate, anybody in the industry, but it will be a few phone calls and a report, and and that's that. I'll never work that way. I'm going to be involved for better or worse, and I take it personal. I really do. I hope that's a good thing. I'm very outcome oriented. We talk about what the result's going to be on day one, and we point that direction as quickly as possible.
Well, speaking of results, I saw your new projections, and it had like 600,000 monthly sales by April of 27, I think, in your business plan.
Yeah, so that might be the best case, but to be honest, we're looking at break even around the middle of 2027.
Yeah, amazing.
Our initial goal is 100,000 in sales, because we're really just flipping the switch here this summer.
Of course.
On the new EDV model. But I feel confident that we're going to get there. I feel confident that the timeline from 100 to 200 is going to be shorter than it was from 0 to 100, and so on and so forth. I think because of how simple this model is, it's much easier to replicate. It's much easier to scale. The team is tired of me saying that we're going to know these products better than we know our pets and our kids, because that's what I say over and over again. We're going to know how to do this from the water all the way out the door, and every single day we're going to micro focus on ways to improve it. And over time, our costs are going to go down, and we're going to get better at selling it with every progressive day. So yes, I'm excited. As you know, you could, a pro forma can say a whole lot, but it actually just needs to kind of play itself out. This one is playing out on an encouraging trajectory to start. That's for sure. Great.
What made this so exciting for you? I'm sure you have people coming to you all the time with opportunities to turn projects around. Why did you pick this one so far from home in an industry that, working waterfront? I mean, that probably was a reach.
Well, I can start by saying that it's 40 degrees cooler in May, and in Central Texas, and so that's appealing. But no, the two factors that come to mind are this as I mentioned earlier, had the building blocks, had a lot more to start with than I typically see. This team, again, a patient lender, incredible investor base, a real product. And so I'm kind of feedback driven, and I was pretty sure we were going to see up or down pretty quickly here.
Yeah.
And we did. We were going to know pretty quickly whether or not this was going to take, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the other factor I just frankly would say, Carrie Rupp asked. She's a force of nature, and she wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. And so there's a certain credibility and importance there on its own.
Right, in the ask, right. Depends on who's asking for your help. That's interesting, though, to kind of come in and get a sense pretty quickly whether or not you have a vision that can thrive. And I think that's an important lesson, I think, even for startups that are just coming out of nowhere. The eternal raises towards this future, which is, going to happen where your product's finally going to run is a bit of a cycle. I think startups get in and it sort of feeds in to all these myths we have of how hard it is to, make a startup work. When in reality, I think the ones that do work often find that success pretty clearly and pretty early on.
Yeah. Well, again, another thing the team has heard me say is this is simple. It's not easy. Or at least that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it as simple as possible. And, a quote I like is Steve Jobs when he said that focus is not about what you say yes to, but it's about saying no to the 100 other good ideas, right? I think that really demonstrates what was going on here. There were a million different ways that Kelp could have been sold in the market. And unfortunately, they were trying a lot of them and not really letting one work long enough to build on. So that's what we're trying now. We're just trying to simplify it and find the model, get stability, and then and only then do we start to grow.
For a blue economy to thrive, people need to use more sustainable products. But which products? And will consumers actually adopt them? Innovators like you are hustling to figure this out. Spark number 9 can tell you if there's demand for your product. Spark markets your product before it's built using online advertising so you launch smarter. Have a big idea? Vet it with Spark before you build. Visit Spark online at www.sparkno9.com or find them on LinkedIn. Yeah. So what does success look like to you right now? Like what will you call a win?
Yeah, there's two ways to look at it. There's the practical, and then there's kind of the more abstract, right? The practical is what I alluded to earlier. When we get to that first $100,000 a month line in sales revenue, that's going to be great. Balloons are going to fall from the ceiling, and because I think that'll be a major benchmark in terms of that this is really working. We have some proof there, but and that's the economics, that's the practical. But the abstract is more how many farmers are we able to line up for the harvest? How many lines of kelp were we able to put in the water that really reinforces that shoreline and takes carbon out of the air and does all the great things for the environment? How many grants is our amazing innovation team able to get to just have that forward pioneering science? Thu and Care are spectacular at writing grants, and this is not an easy grant environment to say the least.
For sure.
They've been incredibly resourceful, and so and really it's just fascinating to go into the lab and see what they're working on. So success is all of those things. It's not just the numbers on a spreadsheet, but it's what it's doing in this community. And to be honest, on day one, I completely underestimated the impact this company has on the community and the aquaculture community and the entire New England world up there. And now I'm getting it more and more every day.
Yeah. Welcome to Maine. I mean, Maine does really buoy around some specific companies and they get excited about them. And I know Maine Angels supported them. I know they've got Maine Venture Fund. They've got all the big people who've been rooting for them. So on the farmer side, are the farmers who farm for you, is this sort of additional income for their other waterfront jobs? Are these lobstermen and stuff, or are these dedicated seaweed farmers? Like, is that a profession now?
Almost all of them are supplementing.
Yeah.
As we were going and circulating to get our agreements these last 2 weeks, we couldn't get anybody. Couldn't even get them on the phone because it was a great time in the water. They finally hit a good season, or a good part of the season, and so
Yeah.
for most of them it is supplemental.
Yeah.
The waters are getting warmer, lobster is harder to bring in, and so this helps.
Why is it so important for ASF to survive and thrive right now?
Yeah. So as I just mentioned, there's the jobs in the larger community and obviously that environmental impact. But one thing I noticed early on in having discussions with particularly external stakeholders or people that were external to the company is that Atlantic Sea Farms really was a bellwether for how things were going in this industry for the ocean economy. At one point, Atlantic Sea Farms was on the front of the New York Times. We were on CNBC. We were named Retailer of the Year by Whole Foods. As we mentioned throughout, the Breed was amazing at getting awareness to this company and to this industry. And so, for better or worse, if ASF disappears, then it's reinforcing the idea that the companies that do the right thing, companies that make a positive impact, can't succeed on their own or can't succeed at the level that the other companies do.
Too.
But, and this is the big but, if it does, if ASF is able to survive and then thrive, then it proves just the opposite, right? That value and impact can go hand in hand and even scale together. The more margin, the more mission. That's what we're trying to really nail right now and prove up. So that's why it's important for ASF to not only just stabilize now, but then turn around and grow.
Well, I certainly hope that's true because that is the whole purpose of this podcast, and to talk about companies that can grow and they can do good for the world. So, ASF has had a really task in, changing habits and playing to new tastes of clients. And that can be a hard mission when your product involves education and adventure and forming new habits. Can you tell me a little bit about that part of the challenge?
Sure. It's a unique product. It can be considered a niche product. It's growing. There's no question. But it boils down to, frankly, it's how people see it and also how people experience it. And it's been my observation, you have to start small. You don't expect people to want to eat a giant bowl of kelp straight out of the ocean. You start with the ready cut ingredients, right? The smaller ingredient level that goes into your staple recipes like chowder or lobster rolls or even sushi, obviously. And so and then you start to get some traction. And once you remind people how great it is for them on a health basis, some people are even influenced just by the impact it's having on the environment, and they'll give it another couple tries if they didn't like it the first time, or you just tried it in a new way, right? If there was another thing that Atlantic Sea Farms did well before, they explored several different ways that you can make this ingredient really work, whether it's fried or otherwise. I know with your background with oysters, sometimes people just don't eat them right out of the ocean, but they'll eat an oyster po' boy.
Yeah. Oyster Rockefeller po' boy, yeah.
Exactly. Without even hesitation. So it's just how you try it, right? You start small and you try to reduce all that friction that comes with people's, predispositions. And, next thing you know, they're eating seaweed salad. And that's, again, speaking earlier of dulls and people's posture changes. We're going to these distributors, we're saying seaweed salad, and they sit up because they get it. They've seen it. And knowing that we're coming with a sustainable version, chemical-free version, it's a traceable version. We don't have dyes, and comparing that to what's already out there, then we're getting a lot of positive response there, and we're going to try and put that out as quickly as we can.
That's great. I'm glad to hear more sitting up. I love your focus on posture, and it just speaks volumes. So tell me, do you have advice for other entrepreneurs who are either trying to bring these like new products to the market, or just battling it out in a business that sort of has a dual mission of doing well and doing good?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like two different things. You're trying to influence somebody to try a product that's new or out of the ordinary. Again, I would say try and make it their idea. Make it so that they can make it their own way, right? Again, if it's fried oysters rather than straight out of the ocean, if it's Maine seaweed salad instead of a big bowl of kelp straight from the harvest, make it theirs. Don't try and own every element of their decision. I think kind of revert back to what we were talking about earlier. When we had our 35 products, I think maybe we were trying to control too much of the outcomes. We were saying you're going to like it fermented, and you're going to like it with this taste, and so on and so forth, and you're going to like it, this in this little box. And so, if an entrepreneur has something that they are sure people are going to like ultimately, then I would listen to your customers a lot more and see the ways that they would really want to use it.
I love that, because I think listening is so important, and we don't talk about it enough in business. But like, to understand what people want and what they need and what their hopes and dreams are, you really just have to listen. I mean, that's, at the oyster farm, everybody wanted to come see the farm, and it turned into a major revenue source for us, bringing people out into the farm and having these tasting tours. And I wouldn't have thought that up, but the people were coming to us asking for this, and we had to kind of turn it into a business. So I think that's really smart. Just listen.
Yeah, and just on the other part of your question. Your question was how do you, if an entrepreneur says, how do you have an impact and also have an ongoing business? I would suggest, and this is really on the heels of this particular experience, that you really lean in to your story. You rather than have it be an afterthought or it might be nice kind of thing. We're telling our customers all about our farmers, and we're telling them all about the process, and we're telling them about how critical this is, and you know what, we're going to compete on price, and if we're close, I know that those customers are going to be compelled by that story.
Yeah.
And so lean into your story, lean into what got you there. Don't try and be everybody else. What you want to be the product or the leader, frankly, that is distinct from everybody else.
Interesting. Good. So, lastly, I just want to know if you're optimistic about the planet now that you're in the seaweed and you're now really on top of the coastal erosion issues and rising seawaters and all of that. How are you feeling?
Yeah, this is a much higher altitude question, right? And I kind of, as you ask it, I kind of have to zoom out. But the first thing that comes to mind is that we as a human race have, when we focus, we can accomplish amazing things, right? From an airplane to a rocket in 60 years that puts us on the moon with computer power now that you could barely find in a calculator. But so that's the positives. That's why you would be cautiously optimistic about how we're all addressing climate change. Now, we're all aware, obviously, there's a very politicized issue. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be.
Right.
Cold War that started the space race, or 9/11 moment that where we have cities underwater before people finally get it. So I think it boils down to, and I hope I'm not rambling here, I apologize, but I think it boils down to just that awareness and those resources. If you want to compare it to the moon landing, then everybody was rooting for this outcome, and I really hope that translates to climate change and to fixing our planet. My goodness, we're it's the only one we got. So
Right.
if we, I don't have any doubt about what we can do if we all put our focus on something. I just wondering what it's going to require to get us there.
Right. Get everybody looking in the same direction. Well, that leaves us with some good food for thought. But thank you so much, Barrett, for coming on the podcast today. It's been so exciting to hear about this adventure, and I really, really wish ASF a fresh start and just tons of success.
Well, thank you so much. I like the way we're pointed, and call us in a year, and I hope to give you an even more exciting update about where we're at.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd love that.